Anybody here a U.S. citizen? Anybody a Canadian citizen? Anybody a citizen from any other country? Anybody here naturalized?
Oh yeah, please.
All right. Well, if you're trying to become a citizen of the United States, it can be quite a process and take up to 5 years. And you have to pass some tests, have a green card and step-by-step procedures, and a lot of people get very nervous, don't even take the test. If you're trying to become a citizen of Mexico, you better know your Spanish because you have to have a Spanish test. Wait 5 years there. Going to go up to Canada, you might wait 5 years, but if you're married, you might only have to wait 3. So there's a lot of different problems with becoming a citizen, especially if you're not born in your native country. Maybe you were a military brat, and so you were in country after country after country and never quite got in your head who you were or what you should be. You were told you were an American, but here you were going to school in maybe Germany, Belgium, somewhere. Could be a little disconcerting. When I was a student pastor in Detroit, I was helping with actually a Methodist church, and we had a fair amount of Hispanic population. And so on Sunday mornings, immigration officers would come and stand outside the doors, and as you would be coming out, you might be pulled over and asked some questions and maybe even hauled away. So some of the other churches in the area heard about this and started coming right after their service, because ours ended a little after theirs, and they would be standing outside the doors also. Sort of a reverse intimidation, and so things did de-escalate. And the Depression started around 2004. A lot of people were pretty destitute, and I was living in Michigan at the time. And so like this little border business began. People would try to put ads and find Canadians that would marry them, and so they could go over to Canada, get on the speed process to become citizens there, and especially for health care. Well, I still think we have a lot of folks trying to come into the United States, and our government politicians waver on who can come, who can't come. Oh, let's build a huge 2,000-mile wall. Oh no, they're refugees, so we got to bring them in by tens of thousands. And so the rebuttals are going, almost makes a person's head spin. I'm not a politically savvy person. I tend to err always on the compassionate side and not always on the practical side, but it is something we're concerned about. It's with us. Well, back in the 1800s, there was a slave, Henry Brown, and Henry was a pretty smart slave, but he worked really hard, and his overseer was supposedly a very compassionate person. And so instead of maybe working 18 to 20 hours a day, the slaves there would work 14 hours. And Henry decided he wanted to marry this woman, and they had a couple kids, and of course the compassionate slave owner broke them up, sold the wife and kids, and decided Henry should be leased out to a tobacco farmer. And so Henry worked very hard at the tobacco farm, but he really wanted his freedom. He devised a plan. He decided that he would get someone free in Virginia to accept him. How did he accept him? Had some friends, put him in a box. I guess from what I've read, the box was 3 feet by 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet. So here he is in the box. And the friends nailed him in that box. Just a little bit of hole for air. Took him to the post office. Henry in there quiet as a mouse, unable to barely move. Indeed, got him shipped. The box said, "This way up. Handle with care." What happened? Thrown, bam, boom, all the way. 27 hours later, he arrived very bruised. Of course, very cramped, tired, and weak. Some Quaker on the other end took that hammer and one nail out. Second nail out. And so forth till the box lid could be opened. They helped him stand to his feet. And instead of any complaints, sighing, he broke into a song and then quoted a song. Wow. Here he was, now supposedly free. He'd made it. Well, that box had opened, and I think we get in our own boxes and somebody's and we're kind of waiting to get out and hoping that somebody on the other end is going to help us toward our goal. Well, you would have thought everything went great. People started calling Henry Box Brown. So Box, of course, needed to make a living, so he went out and he spoke. Became an abolitionist himself. Well, some of the other abolitionists decided he had no right to speak. I mean, the way he had gotten over wasn't really legitimate, and it also might encourage other slaves to try that, and well, that just wasn't the way you should go about doing things. But he did then decide to do some entertaining, little sideshow sorts of things to make a little money, and he was doing okay with that. Well, as government policies go, the compromise came about that the Fugitive Slave Act should be enacted. And you would have thought that the northern folks would have stood up against it, but get some money for these slaves. Hey, might not be so bad. I mean, after all, they were runaways and they broke the laws there. And we should really help with those laws. Get some money. Well, it became known as the Bloodhound Act. Yeah, they get out with the bloodhounds, get the slave, mess them up pretty good, but not so bad that they wouldn't get the bounty, take them back, get the bounty, come back, energized got the money, going to do some more. Well, Box knew they'd be coming for him. So the box he had gotten out of and thought was going to be the free box, and the open box was closing in again. He borrowed some money from a gambler, got on a ship and got to England, going to be free over in England. Well, he started acting there and doing some speaking about his experience. Fell in love with a white woman. Well, that just kind of rankled some people. Got roughed up a little bit over that. And then some people found out, oh, he had a wife and kids back in the States. So let's slander his name for that. Well, yeah, they thought, go back and get those wife and kids, live there and take care of them. This went on for many years. Barely making a living, but doing what he could. Well, I'm glad that I live in a kingdom that supersedes any other type of kingdom, the stuff that's going on around here. I've gotten in a box a number of times, so to speak, and not knowing which way to turn, hoping somebody on the other end's going to pry open that box for me. Sometimes I thought it never would happen. But I knew, and I knew, and I knew somebody else had some down through the ankles. Well, Joseph of Arimathea had to take them down and pull out those nails. Left some holes. You know, sometimes when those nails come out, we're still left with some hole marks. But the biggest example we had was that beyond the nailing, having those nails pulled out, was a resurrection. And that's where the real kingdom is. And in that kingdom, not going to worry. Now we've supposedly already stepped into the kingdom, but we know it's not fulfilled yet. There's different interpretations of what's going to happen. Some people say the kingdom will start when Jesus comes back. Some will be taken to the heavens, some will come back and live on the earth. But we know, ultimately, it's better than what we know today. Tomorrow's Martin Luther King Jr.'s special day that we memorialize. And like Paul, he said, brothers and sisters, I don't yet consider myself to have taken hold of it. But one thing I do know, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Jesus Christ. Usually we think of King's I Have a Dream speech. And he said in that speech that those gathered had come to cash in on a check, a promissory note, a note to which every American was to fall heir, all, including the black and the whites and all disenfranchised persons. I think that promissory note is still waiting to be cashed. The beloved community really hasn't totally materialized. A lot of policies and promises that are made just don't come through. They're written with one hand while the other hand's erasing them. There's going to be a tax. They're going to take away the tax, but behind it, there's going to be a user fee. Yeah, tax is gone, user fee's coming. Right, left. Never quite right, never quite believable. Well, get back to our box Prout. Things were supposedly a little better in the United States by 1875, so he came back with his wife, new children. Again, tried to talk about his experience as a slave and his way to freedom. Wasn't, again, well received in a lot of circles in the United States, so he once again went back to acting. Some people wanted to run him again out of the United States. He never felt free. Somebody was always one step ahead. Somebody always wanted to put one more nail in his box. He ended up going to Canada and eventually died in Toronto. I think that's the death. That was the box that finally really set him free. Lost Nancy a while ago, and her nails kept coming, health nails. At the end, she had some visitations from her family, deceased family, and during those times, she would actually be breathing better than usual. She was on oxygen and a ventilator there at the end. And I thought, she is becoming freer. So she's in the kingdom, totally over in the kingdom, waiting for us. And Jesus had talked about that little pine nut that goes into the ground and then becomes a big pine tree, even where an eagle can nest in it. And I think the kingdom of heaven really is like that. Astrophysicists tell us that the universe is like a little raisin put into some bread. And as the bread grows, the raisin's still there, but it keeps going and going and going. And Jesus planted that little bit of the kingdom there. And it's always expanding, always expanding, always expanding, and always expanding. So expansive, it can't exclude anybody, anything, any sin, any hatred. It's wild. Think about it. It's just going to keep on growing, keep on going. And so are we. God be with us this morning. Amen.
Amen. Amen.